It's pretty good size. She's 311 feet long, 27 feet wide, and 47 feet tall.
Anywhere you go, there will be something from Spiro in a collection nearby. That's why it was called the King Tut of the West.
If you're ever in downtown Tulsa, remember to stop by and enjoy the center of the universe.
Oklahoma's green country.
Can you let go of my thumb and I can get you some more?
It's full of unique places.
This does remind me of the Flintstones house. This thing's huge.
It's pretty impressive.
And interesting people.
This is the trading post here.
I have a lot of paranormal activity over here.
What is that, a horse?
So come along with us and enjoy the ride.
We're at a very special park in Muskogee. It is the War Memorial Park. It used to have just one big item on display, but now it has several unique things. And Rick is the park manager,
Yes.
and you're going to tell us a little bit about the memorial.
Yeah, we'll take you around and show you a few things that we've got around here, some of the things we've been doing.
So is this actually a depth charge launcher?
Yeah, it's an early device. It's a K gun. It works on a black powder basis.
A gun?
K gun is what it is, and it's basically like a giant potato gun, if you've ever played with those
Oh, yeah.
before. Yeah, there's a black powder charge that goes down in the middle. They set it off, and it essentially creates a puff of air that ejects this off the side of the boat.
Oh, I've seen that in the old John Wayne movies, the boom
Yes.
sound.
Yes.
That's neat. I mean, some of this stuff is really hard to get, I imagine.
It is. Pretty much everything we got, the 3 inches, the 5 inches, those all come from the military.
Yeah.
There's a big process we have to go through to acquire those.
And by 3-inch?
This is a 3-inch right here, a 3-inch deck gun, very typical, typical of one that the submarine would have used in World War II.
Is 3-inch the size of the bore?
That is how big around it is, the diameter of the bullet.
So it is a bullet,
It is a bullet, 3-inch bullet.
which would rip through about anything.
Oh yeah, yeah. This you have several kinds of rounds. You have a straight shot round, which punches a straight hole into it. If you're putting a 3-inch hole in the bottom of a boat, that's going to start leaking water. Or you can also use an explosive round, which is good for anti-aircraft or anti-personnel. That is a round that goes out in the air and actually explodes, creating shrapnel.
Well, and you have something that you just got that's really, really rare over there.
This is the mast from the USS Oklahoma.
From Pearl Harbor.
From Pearl Harbor. It is the last piece of the battleship left above water.
That is rare. I mean, that is it. That's the only one of its kind. It's fantastic. It's back in Oklahoma.
Yes, it is fantastic. The battleship Oklahoma has such a wonderful and unique story behind her of a peacetime vessel. Never fired her weapons in anger once, but she lost her life, or lost the boat, in December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Wow.
Eternal Father, strong to save.
This is dedicated to the 52 submarines lost in World War II.
52?
52, 3,505 sailors lost their lives. That's 20% of our submarine force during World War II.
Good night.
It was a high mortality rate, but each plaque tells about one of the boats lost, lists any crew members that were lost on it.
From rock and tempest, fire and foe, protect them wheresoever they go.
This is the centerpiece, and this is what everybody comes to see.
And it is the
USS Batfish.
You know, when you look at this from a distance, it doesn't look that big. But once you start to approach it, this thing's huge.
It's pretty good size. She's 311 feet long, 27 feet wide, and 47 feet tall from the keel up to the top of the shears up there.
More than a football
A
field.
little bit more than a football field.
Well, and I gotta tell you, I'm getting a little vertigo because you look down, we're kind of way up here too, aren't we?
You're about 20 feet up off of the ground. This is a real unique view as compared to the other boats that are still in the water, because most of that's underwater still.
Oh, good point. Do you have the cable here in case of a heavy rain?
Quite literally, yes.
Really?
In '86, the bank of the river flooded. It's just past the fence bank over here,
Yeah.
and the boat came off the ground 5 feet.
She's still seaworthy in a way.
Back in '86, she was.
It just goes on forever.
Well, again, we compare this to some of the larger vessels of today, like the aircraft carriers. That's 4 acres just on the flight deck.
Now, I'm looking at, this is wood here.
Yes.
So this is original, or?
This was all originally wood. Now, we've been in the process of restoring everything. You see some of the holes where we've still got working going on. This whole structure here was designed so that we can walk on top of the boat. And they used wood to give you traction.
So this is where the periscope is?
Yeah, the 2 periscopes. You can see them way up high. Those 2 silver poles coming out of the top, those are your periscopes. One attack and one for viewing.
Oh, that's neat.
Yes.
You want to go inside now?
Yes, by all means. Now, we're going to go down into a little different lifestyle. This is where we get to see what they really live like.
Oh, my.
These boats had a unique name, actually 2 of them they carried through the war. They used to call them pig boats and sewer pipes because they literally stank.
Really?
Because you've got 80 crew on this vessel. They're out for 2 months. Everything they bring with them comes into the vessel with them. Food, clothing, ammunition, supply, spare parts, it all comes in.
Right.
The 2 months that they're at sea, they do not get showers.
Wow.
So you've got a bunch of 18-year-old sweaty, smelly guys that come off of this thing.
And right now, this is probably one of the bigger areas in the submarine.
Yes.
But because it's so small, we've actually brought the host cam. I'll do the best I can running this little bitty thing right there. And Brian's going to be using his camera. But right now, this is a torpedo room, correct?
This is the forward torpedo room.
Okay.
This is what I typically call the primary business end of the vessel. We've got the 6 tubes forward, and
So by 6 tubes forward, we've got these, I see 4.
4, 5, and 6 are down low.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
These are where the torpedoes go in. It's like a big gun. It's a pellet gun, essentially, is the way it works, because they use compressed air to eject the torpedoes out of the tubes, and then the propellers take you in and carry them on.
And
These are your torpedoes. Now, I have 2 flavors in here that we've added in. This bottom one is a Mark 18, very typical for what they would use during the war. Same size, dimensions, the whole 9 yards, ran a 600-pound warhead. This top one is a Mark 45. It's much more modern, used in the 50s and the 60s. It had a 24-kiloton warhead on it. It was a nuclear weapon.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Was. Not now.
Not now.
Okay.
Navy won't let us play with the live rounds.
And in here, it is dark.
It is
but
dark.
You've kept this authentic, correct?
Yes, it is our goal to keep the environment as close to what it was like back in the war as we can. Now again, normally this compartment would be packed. You would have 16 torpedoes, same as this bottom one here.
16 in here?
16 in here, yes. 6 in the tubes, 2 down the bilges, and the other 8 stacked on skids like this. 16 crewmen are sleeping in here.
In these bunks?
These are their
16
bunks.
men?
Yes.
In here?
They'd have additional bunks off the sides of the skids, 2 more that come in at the ladder where we just come into. These men lived in here. This was their life.
And this was very dangerous in here too, because these things are heavy.
Yes, 3,000 pounds.
So does this come out like this, and then?
Their loading procedure, you've got a chuck right here, that's just to stop, and you'd have to get a crew of 8 to 10 guys on this and grab it, pull it over, and then using block and tackle around it, push the torpedo into the tube.
Wow, and then these don't move, so this had to go up and down. So this is a floor you put in that's just to help us with the tour?
The floor is original, but it would come up so they could go down inside.
So it wasn't just let's fire?
No.
It was a procedure?
There was a procedure. Now, you kept your tubes loaded at all times so that they were ready to go.
Okay.
But the loading procedure, you're looking at a 15 to 20 minute process to load one of these torpedoes in the tubes. Would you like to see the rest of the boat?
Sure. Whoa!
It is tight. Again, remember, 80 people lived on this thing. Now, as we're coming through this hatch here, you're coming into the officers' quarters.
A little galley?
Well, it's a small pantry area.
Pantry.
Yeah, 2 stewards kind of take care of the officers.
Okay.
The officers basically live here when they're not on duty. And you, again, remember, these are the luxury accommodations.
These are the officers.
These are the officers.
And that's where they would eat.
This is where they would eat. And as you come off to your left there, that is a skipper's cabin. He's the only man who's got his own room. Everybody else is sharing and sometimes sharing beds too.
Oh my
They got to rotate out, do what's called hot bunking.
In the Navy.
In the Navy.
Okay.
The one exception to the officers as far as enlisted is this cabin. This is where the chief petty officers live.
That
the,
silver thing, is that a toilet or a
No,
sink?
that's actually referred to as a scuttlebutt. It's a sink.
Oh, good. Okay.
It's a small sink. The heads, we just passed one which was reserved for the officers. There's two more in the back for the enlisted men.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Yeah. All right, coming this way through this hatch, we're going to go into the control room. This is the nerve center of the vessel. I also like to call it the driver's seat. Like a car, except we take 9 men to drive this thing.
There's a lot in here.
Starting over in the corner here, this is your trim manifold. That's where we keep the boat balanced.
All the copper stuff?
All those copper stems coming out. There are a bunch of valves.
Wow.
And then right next to that, you see two big wheels, which are your forward or aft and forward dive planes. That's what steers the vessel up and down when it's underwater.
Oh, those are large.
They're very large.
Yeah.
They're designed so when the hydraulics go out, they can do it manually.
Oh, okay.
These levers over here in the board, this is your this is where they blow the ballast tanks,
cool.
taking on water, causing them to go underwater. And then over here is a secondary rudder control, right and left steering.
Gotcha.
Then coming back around over this side, this is your electrical panel. It's like a big circuit box at your house. It turns various parts of the boat on and off. And then this over here next to me, this is the the ballast manifold. This is where they blow air back into the ballast tanks, pushing the water out and causing them to come back up to the surface.
And then what's up in here?
That up there is the con. That is where the skipper takes command of the vessel when we're in attack.
Can I go up there?
Yeah, oh, by all means.
Okay.
Some of the items we have up there, we have the two periscopes, the radar, the sonar, the plotting table, as well as what's called the TDC, and that's your guidance system for the torpedoes themselves. You can have up to 12 men in that little hole up there. It's only 10-foot diameter and 10 feet long.
Wow, and I see the periscope.
Yeah.
That's cool. So why'd they have them separated?
Well, there's two scopes. One is an attack scope. It's got a much smaller orifice on the top. That way, when they stick it out of the water, it leaves a smaller wake, so the enemy vessel will have less chance of detecting them.
Wow, this is tight up in here.
It is. You get a real perspective on these submarine movies we watch by being in a real submarine. You understand it isn't as big as they make it look.
Wow, that's just something up there. I guess you have this blocked off just for safety reasons.
It is. That hatch remains open, and unfortunately there's no guardrail or anything to keep someone from stepping back down the hole. And it's a good 20-foot drop there.
Where to next?
Where to next? We'll move on into the galley and the crew's quarters. All right, now that was the nerve center of the boat. And coming through this hatch, we go into what I call the heart of the boat. This is the crew's mess in the galley. This is where all the enlisted eat on this side, and on that side is where all the meals for all 80 men are prepared, even the officers.
All right, so you have some eggs and mush ready here already?
Oh yeah, let's try to make it as real as possible. These cooks were busy. These guys had a lot of work for them. They got the best food in the Navy. For 40s, they're eating fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh eggs and milk for a while. These guys even had their own ice cream machine on board, which was a real treat back in the 40s.
Yeah.
This was reserved for the admirals on the battleships.
Now, if I'm looking at the table, these are authentic?
Yes.
Multi-purpose. So this is your game room.
Yes. We have got to use every bit of space to the utmost capability.
I can see they're used in some of the space to the utmost capability.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, you got 80 guys on board.
Oh, gosh.
Pennsylvania 6, 5,000.
This is the crew's quarters. You've got 36 bunks in there. That's where all the crew sleep, the regular crew.
And this lighting is authentic, too, because you had to keep it dark because you work shifts, right?
You work shifts, and this is where we get into some of the hot bunking. There's not enough bunks for the crew, so they'll have to rotate out of the bunks.
Yeah.
Now this here is your forward engine room. Now we actually have 2 engine rooms on board, which is a unique design for these early submarines. Most submarines only had 1.
These are huge.
They're huge. 4 of them on board. These are Fairbanks Morse 9-cylinder post-piston engines, still used in power plants today. Now these engines are only used to charge batteries. They provide electrical power.
This whole thing ran off battery.
Yes.
That's the biggest battery toy ever made.
It is. It is. We have 2 Banks batteries. One would be situated underneath the officers in the crew's quarters. 126 battery cells. Each one is 4 foot tall by 2 foot by 2 foot.
Whoa, daylight.
That's usually the first response. Daylight and fresh air.
Daylight and 105 degrees too. Wow.
We could be in Arizona where it was 110, so
A good point.
we're
Hey,
pretty lucky.
thank you so much for the
Not
tour.
a problem.
Really
Happy
appreciate
to
it.
do it. Love it.
There is a great place in the middle of downtown Tulsa. We're between First and Archer on the old Boston Bridge, and we're going to the center of the universe. I've never done this before, but apparently if you stand in the middle of this brick circle, you can hear things like a pin drop. The acoustics are supposed to be pretty incredible, and people on the outside really can't hear you. So I'm stepping in for the first time, and I'm gonna be right here, and oh, it really does. That is cool. There's like an echo sound. I hope the mic is picking this up because I sound powerful, like the god of the center of the universe. This is really neat. I don't know how it works, but this is awesome. I mean, right here in the center of the universe, you have to be aiming right in line with the crack, apparently, to make it work. If I stand away from it, well, I can still hear it here too. This is something, if you have a little bit of time, you gotta come to see, because this is neat. So remember, if you're ever in downtown Tulsa, between First and Archer on the old Boston Bridge, remember to stop by and enjoy the center of the universe. We are near Spiro at the Spiro Mounds Archeological Center, and Dennis, you're going to help us out today to give us a tour and explain the importance of this site, right?
That's right. We're going to be talking about what essentially is the most powerful group ever to exist in the U.S. And it's also the only prehistoric site in Oklahoma that you can visit.
So are these images of the Caddoans right here?
Well, this is a mural that's made from the art at Spiro. Spiro has over 75% of all leadership art, fancy stuff, found in the eastern U.S. is found just here at this one site.
This society was kind of the equivalent of the Washington, D.C. of the United States area, basically.
Exactly. Spiro was kind of the seat of a national confederation, what we call the Mississippian culture, from 700 through 1500 AD, incorporating over 60 different tribes, over 30 different language groups, directly involving over 3 million people, another 3 million or so that are on the edges, and pretty much everywhere from the Rockies to the Virginia coast, from the Gulf Coast of Florida to the Great Lakes.
Now this is kind of like a geographical layout of this area, right?
Right.
And archaeologists, or actually kind of fortune hunters, found the mounds. Why were the mounds so important? What was the purpose behind them?
There are 12 mounds here, 3 down on the bottoms, 9 more on the upper terrace. Now only the leaders and the buildings that are for their institutions are built on mounds.
Okay, so these weren't just burial sites for artifacts, they were actually structures on top of here to begin with.
Exactly.
And then what happened is that some of the leaders were interred in a mound, and that's where the artifacts were also put.
Exactly, and that's mostly from the one burial mound, the Craig Mound. 4 humps, but it's all one mound. Over 1,100 leaders were interred there, only leaders.
1,100?
Over 1,100, starting around 7 to 800 AD, continuing till 1450 AD.
So there were lots of things in the burial mound. How did they choose what to put in the burial mound? I mean, this is very simplistic looking here, so they had more things put in than this, or?
Tons of it. I mean, some of these leaders end up being buried with millions of items. I mean, millions. These are items that showed their power while they were alive, and for them, they believed that power, that status, continued into the afterlife. Instead of being a brick wall, it was a doorway. So the more they could reinforce the power of that primary leader, that grand soleil or great sun, the more they liked it. The city here, I mean, this is like the center of everything, had about 500 folks living here. But this would be like the president and Congress. But they are surrounded by a city that covered 5 square miles or more, farming the river bottoms, living mainly on the terraces, spread out over a very wide area. Now that makes it the largest city west of the Mississippi Basin, but also a mid-sized city for the time. The New York City of the period is a site called Cahokia. It's where East St. Louis is today. Had about 50,000 people in it. Biggest city in the U.S. prehistorically, bigger than any city in Europe at that same period of time.
It's a bustling society. We can see the artifacts. They're doing a lot of really neat stuff. What led to their demise? Because if they kept going, the United States we know right now would be completely different, right?
Very much different. What happens is that when they're developing, the environment in the U.S. was extremely lush. So that's why it allowed for them to be able to farm a lot, produce a lot of resources, and have these big cities and multiple contacts. Okay. But what happens around 1300 is that the U.S. goes into a major change, a drought cycle, a change in the pattern of rainfall. Well, that meant that your surpluses no longer are there. Cities of 10,000 require an enormous amount of resources, and now they're not producing it. So you spread out. The city of 10,000 goes to about 2,500. Now the people are still here, but nobody believes in the elites anymore.
So then they start forming their own tribes, their own cultures. So does that kind of set it up so when the Europeans come over, all of a sudden they find not one big strong coalition, but lots of small coalitions, and it made it easier to come in and press their will on the land?
Exactly. When Spiro and the other major players lose their power base, nobody's holding together this national confederation. It'd be like if you eliminated Washington, D.C. from the equation, you'd have all these states who would squabble with one another. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what happens when Spiro's power disintegrates around 1450.
You have artifacts here, but I noticed that there's replica on each one. One of the biggest problems is that the burial mound got plundered, basically.
Very much so. About half of the materials that we have on display are original items, but the fanciest items, those aren't, because they're held by facilities all over the world. And from 1933 to 35, a local group calling themselves the Pecola Mining Company. They weren't miners, they weren't a company. They dug into the burial mound and started digging up the artifacts and eventually selling them all over the world. Anywhere you go, there will be something from Spiro in a collection nearby. That's why it was called the King Tut of the West, because nobody had ever seen anything like the amount and the sophistication of art that was here at Spiro. Over 65 public facilities in the U.S. alone have materials. From the Smithsonian to UCLA, University of Chicago to the University of Texas, all over Oklahoma and Arkansas. Overseas in places like the Louvre in Paris, the British Museum in London, National Museum in Germany, and all over the rest of the world.
And puzzle pieces in the ground. No one ever seems to be digging. Instead they're looking up towards the heavens with their eyes on the heavens. The shadows on the way to the heavens.
So, aside from the museum, you also have these walking trails which take you around to the mountains, and you have done a recreation of one of the huts that the people would have lived in?
That's right. This is a reconstruction of House 7. The original was built 900 to 1000 AD as a kind of like a senator's house. You would have had about 15 people living in there. A big difference for us today, but it is a good-sized home. Regular people lived in homes built the same way, but about half this size.
And it's a thatched roof.
Thatched roof.
It needs a little bit of repair.
Yeah,
right now.
we're in the process of trying to do it now.
Have you ever lived in one of these?
I spent 6 weeks in here with my field crew of 15. We were doing excavation on the upper terrace, and it was so cool. It was neat to be in, and it was much better than the tents that used to drip on us and blow over about 2 o'clock in the morning.
So now I know how you came up with that number of 15. So this is which mound?
That's all one mound. It's the Craig Mound. It's the only burial mound for the site. It has 4 humps to it, but it's all one mound.
And then did you say they layered the artifacts on top?
What you would do is you'd have a group of burials, sometimes as few as 5 or 10, sometimes as a couple of hundred people, being brought out on top of the mound and placed on that flattened top. Then they would have one big ceremony, bring in basket loads of dirt until you had a layer of about 4 to 5 feet thick, flatten the top and slope it again, and then later on, maybe decades later, another layer and another layer of dirt. So along with the bodies go all the fancy stuff that showed people's status while they were alive and will continue that status after their death. Of the total site, mound and non-mound areas, less than 15% has ever been tested. That's the part that we control. Of the city surrounding us, which at its height was 5 square miles, less than 1% has ever been looked at. So yeah, there's an enormous amount of research to be done. Our last series was from 79 through 82. Since 82, no money available.
So we have one of the most important archaeological historical sites in America's history. It's just sitting there waiting to be opened up. I can't imagine what the stories are going to be told once you guys do get inside those mounds.
Well, we hope to be able to do it. It takes money, so hopefully the economy picks up real soon. But right now, at least, it's preserved.